Hello, everyone. My name is Terry Lynn Rodriguez, and I'm the Chapter Member Relations Analyst here at IIBA. Welcome to the webinar. We're so glad that you've joined us. Organizations are investing millions of dollars into business data analytics, but many are finding that their investments aren't returning the value they expected. These shortfalls can be attributed to a core set of values, issues, many of which are easily addressed with effective business analysis. Today, you'll learn about the 5 domains of business data analytics, the core challenges organizations have been struggling with when rolling out their analytics practices, and how the business analyst skill set is ideal for helping organizations address these challenges. The presentation slide deck is available in the handout section, and please feel free to enter your questions and comments via the question box during the presentation, and we'll address those in the Q&A portion of the session. This webinar is being recorded and will be posted in the webinar archives on IIBA's website under public webinars within 5 business days. It is my pleasure to introduce you to our presenter, Laura Patton, a business analysis thought leader with over 30 years of in-depth project management and business analysis experience across numerous industries. Laura is IIBA's product manager consultant, and she's passionate about helping organizations and individuals mature and improve their BA skills and practice. Laura, welcome. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Terry Lynn. I'm very excited to be here and very excited to get this discussion going, so I'm going to jump in right away. I'm going to begin first by looking at this quote. It kind of starts us off here. So let me just move this window so I can actually read the quote. So here it is. Behind effective decision-making, there's a profusion of data and metrics, but above all, there is great analysis. So think about that for a minute. So this quote is really going to set the tone for what we're going to discuss here today. I want to be talking about the value of business analysis and the value we bring as business analysts to business data analytics. Even though we're speaking about a different type of project, I'm assuming most of the people here are working maybe in software development or maybe process improvement. Maybe you are working in business data analytics, but I'm going to take the assumption that most of you are here because you want to learn about it and how you can work as a resource on these teams. But from our traditional project experience, our IT software development experience, we're just talking about applying those skills in a different context, which is business data analytics. And so what my objective here today with you is to demonstrate how you can take what you already know and that value that you bring to a team, and through good analysis skills, you can achieve better business outcomes for your clients and for your organization. And you can do that on a business data analytics initiative. Okay? All right, so just a slide on myself. I do not want to talk about myself, but one takeaway I want you to see is I've actually been at this for a couple decades now, right? I've seen a lot of changes within business analysis, and the excitement that we have now with the shifts in the profession are really exciting. So we're going to focus on that today because we are going through another transformation, at least I feel, within our profession. Today on this webinar, we're going to talk about one of the biggest changes that we're seeing today with business analysis and what's impacting business analysts on their job. And this is the explosion we're seeing with business data analytics. So basically after, like I said, having done this for so many years, seeing a lot of transformations, this one's a big one, and I'm happy to talk with you about it today. So let's jump in and see what we'll cover in the next hour. I'm going to start off by first defining what is business data analytics, okay? Now, it's not a new profession in the least. It is becoming a hot topic. I'm sure you're seeing information all over the place out there about analytics. And it's really becoming more of a focus for a few reasons. There's an explosion in the digital world, driving organizations to get access to a whole bunch of data we haven't had before. And there's a lot of growth in technologies that are enabling us to get to this information. Machine learning, AI just being two of those. So the technologies and then the tools and then just all of this data availability is really changing the landscape. Next, I'm going to dig into business data analytics a bit deeper by explaining it in the context of 5 domains. We typically will see these domains as groupings of work, and I'll explain what I mean by that. But we'll talk about each of the domains, and I'll explain what they are and the type of work that you would typically see performed within each of those domains. And then I'm going to go to what I feel is a real climax to this webinar, which is I'm going to talk about the opportunities that exist for business analysts that are looking to grow their skill set or maybe specialize. And we'll talk about how you can take what you know and on top of that skill set, maybe learn a little bit more, but you're going to have this high demand skill set for the demand we see in analytics. So we'll talk about that and make that connection for you. I really want to make sure that you take some good notes when I go through that section, because you're going to see a lot of opportunity for you as a business analyst and where you can add value to your organizations on analytics initiatives. And then lastly, I'll spend a few minutes to discuss what IBA is doing to support individuals in organizations that are interested in business data analytics. So that's the scope of what I'd like to cover with you today. So let's get going by looking at first what we mean when we talk about business data analytics. Think about that. How do you define it? Okay, well, IBA has defined business data analytics as a practice by which a specific set of techniques, competencies, procedures are applied to perform continuous exploration, iteration, and investigation of past and current business data for the purpose of obtaining insights about a business that can lead to improved decision making. Okay, I know that's a lot of words. It's a very comprehensive definition. Basically, but what we are saying here is that it's a practice of helping your organizations improve their decision making abilities. And you're doing this by using what you learn about the data your organizations have available or have access to. Now, you'll see here in a minute, the data is needing to be obtained. And once obtained, there is a process to analyze it. And the results then are used to draw insights about whatever it is you want to know, your marketplace, maybe new products, or your customer behavior, whatever the organization is interested in investigating. What you are learning from the analytics or from the analysis about the data is going to be used as an input into a decision-making process. Okay, so that's what we're going to walk through. So what we're talking about here, though, from this definition is really what we call evidence-based decision-making. And we give it that term because we have information that helps decision makers in their decision-making process, basically. So we're making decisions based upon insights that are obtained from analyzing the data. And we're doing this instead of just making a random decision, just a decision based on gut feel or a personal preference or some other means by which maybe a personal bias could cloud the decision-making process. Okay, so while it's a thorough definition, hopefully walking through it and understanding, breaking it apart, it makes a lot more sense what we're talking about here. All right, so now let's look at the 5 practice domains of business data analytics. A domain, when I talk about a domain, I should explain that. It's nothing more than a grouping of similar tasks. And what could I equate it to is, it would be similar to as a business analyst doing affinity mapping, right? If you went through an affinity mapping exercise, you would be taking ideas or topics, and typically we put them on Post-it notes and we assimilate them under a grouping or a name. And it's basically what we're doing here. So when we look at business data analytics, we're typically see these following groups that we're going to walk through, and then there's activities being performed underneath them, all right? So nothing magical, it's just a logical grouping, all right? So these groups are identifying the research questions, sourcing data, analyzing data, interpreting and reporting the results, and using the results to influence business decision making. So let's dig into each of these a little bit further and give you a stronger understanding of the type of work or the type of activities that you could expect in each of these areas. When we talk about identifying the research question, it's where business data analytics initiatives start. It's a really important first step because this is going to guide the work, the remaining work that you do in business data analytics. So a research question is something that's important for the business to have answered. It's going to help direct the work of the analytics team. And based on what the question is, it will determine what data you need to source and analyze. And then, of course, it's going to gear us towards providing insights to help, eventually answer that question. Now, one thing I should mention is when we discuss these domains, keep in mind as you listen to me explaining them, see if you see any similarities to the work that you do already, maybe on a traditional IT project where you're a business analyst, or if you're doing process improvement or some other flavor, of a project. See if you see and can draw on that experience you have and see if there's any similarities to the type of work I'm discussing here. So let's look at identifying the research questions a little bit more deeply. What is the work that's happening there? So in this particular first domain, the type of work that we see happening is defining the business problem or opportunity. We see work that's done to assess the current state, define the future state, and the last activity would be framing the research question. So just from those names, doesn't it feel maybe a little bit like strategy analysis from the Baybock Guide? Maybe a little, right? Some of these elements. Basically, what's happening here, though, is an understanding about the current state of the organization is happening because it's required to build our business domain knowledge. And an important output from this domain is going to be that research question, the research question that analytics is going to be asked to answer. So in order to frame the question properly, or in order to make sure the question is asking something of importance to the business, to make sure that the analytics work is helping the organization move the lever forward to deliver something that supports their strategy, this pre-analysis piece is, what's happening. It's, understanding the context, the current state. What are we trying to figure out? Where are we trying to go? And this is much done as it is today when we build the context on a traditional IT project. So it's a little different, but you can see it's a little the same. So if you see that similarity, right, you can understand how some of the skills that you have today on traditional projects could be leveraged. Now, we don't have time to go into each of these. I'd like to tell you about the techniques you can use or the outputs that you're producing, right? But in general, I want you to just get this high level overview about the importance of setting the context, the pre-work, and understand or think about it in your head now about how the BA would be in the best position based on the skills that you have to do this work on an analytics initiative. So one other thing I want to mention before moving on is that I'm going to be discussing these domains. Obviously, it's sequential, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but none of that is going to assume that the work in analytics is done sequentially. So keep that in mind. Analytics is like business analysis in general. It's an iterative process, and think about revisiting any of these domains in any order when you need to do work in that specific area. So on an analytics initiative, if the data is not providing the results expected, or maybe a better scenario is the data is not available, right? You think you're going to have data to analyze, you have your research question defined, when you go to get the data, you don't have access. So you have to go back, maybe you have to tweak the question, or maybe the plan that you come up with for capturing the data has to be revisited. So an iterative process, just keep that in mind. So despite the fact I'm explaining it sequentially, don't think of it sequentially, okay? So let's go on to domain number 2. This is sourcing the data. And as the name indicates, this is going to be the work to acquire, the data itself. And it consists of a set of activities that you're going to use to determine what data you need to answer the research question that your team is going to, answer. And then it involves some activities to look at the data, make sure it's, there, available, of sufficient quality, and that it really can be relied upon for the analysis that you're doing. Now, in source data, you'll see the types of tasks or activities performed. Number 1, you're going to determine what data is needed based on the research question the teams agreed to answer, or that they're going after. You're going to identify what data your company already has. So what data exists, what data is still needed. If there's data that you need and you don't have it, then you have to go out and figure out, how do you get it? Do you have to buy it? Do you have to find other processes where you can start collecting that data that you don't have? Okay, and based on that type of data that you decide or settle on, how often do you need to collect that information? So it may need to be daily, monthly might be enough, right? So the decisions here are going to be very unique to the situation that you're analyzing. And so, a BA could help with, uncovering this information. And another thing to keep in mind is obtaining data is expensive. So there's a lot of different decision making that needs to happen to ensure that we source data appropriately for the need, based on budget and time considerations and a lot of different other characteristics. So we have considerations too about regulated industries, or maybe where data is accessed from, it's restricted. So the BA would be able to go through business rules and regulations and things like that. So we need to know when these rules or laws are governing this process and how it could impede our ability to get access. So that's the type of stuff that we want to be thinking about here. Another activity is the quality aspect of the data. I mean, we may have the data or think we have it and we can get access to it, but then based on where we're getting the data, is it of sufficient quality? Do we have a lot of missing data? Is the data accurate? Is it complete? Is it reliable, right? So very important. And then based on all of these factors, if we are planning our approach to sourcing the data, we think it's going to go a certain way, nothing ever works out the way we planned originally, right? Iterative process. We have to adjust the approach to come back to make sure that we can get high quality data in the time frame that we need, and without violating restrictions and privacy laws and stuff, right? So that's the source data domain. That's the work that's going on here. So now we get into domain 3, which involves the analysis work. Now, up to this point, as I've been walking through it, you might have been thinking about some of the stuff sounds familiar to you, right? You can start thinking of tasks that you do that you can compare, or some skills that you have that you can lend in these areas. And so now we get to this one, and it says analyze the data, and you're like, oh, analysis, that's what I do, right? Well, it's actually going to maybe surprise you when we get into this, to look at it, because this isn't analysis from the traditional sense that we're used to doing on our regular projects. But let's take a look at what it is. So when we talk about analyzing the data, this is a first step would be preparing the data that we are sourcing for analytics. And this is now, we've done a little initial, investigation of data sources, but now we have to prepare the data, get it ready for our full on-suite of analysis activities. And so this would involve establishing relationships between data or data sources, linking between different sources to create some coherent data set that will feed our model and feed the analysis. And basically, we're doing all this knowing in mind where we're trying to get and what the objectives of the initiative are. So that's preparing the data. And then we get to analyzing the data. And this is not the analysis now that traditionally BAs are thinking about. This is the application of mathematics, completing extensive mathematical analyses relating to answering the research question, okay? So that's what this analysis is. And then results helpful, right? Look at the results obtained. Make a determination as to whether the results are getting us to where we're trying to get to answer that research question. And this step or this task, it involves collaborating as an analytics team, determining whether the results from the data exploration process or the data analysis once completed is helping to answer the business question that we're wanting to answer. So even though the math piece, the BA might not be doing that part, there's a lot of facilitation here that they could be helping with. And when the data isn't producing the results expected, this task would involve making some adjustments to the mathematical models that are being built. And we would keep tweaking the models until we can be assured that the models are working properly. Now, the resources who are responsible for analyzing data have very technical skills. They are really resources who are going to be driven by numbers. The work that they're doing is going to require strong math skills, strong technical skills, including strong mathematics and statistics background, right? They're going to need knowledge of different coding languages, maybe algorithmic modeling, machine learning, other technologies like that, right? So these aren't the typical types of skills that we're going to expect to have in a business analyst. Therefore, what we would say here is that this is one domain where we don't expect the BAs building the models and crunching the data, right? But it is that place where the BA is working closely with a data scientist. And think about it in a traditional IT project when we start working with a software developer, right? It's kind of a similar relationship. So the role isn't doing as much now while the coding and the building and the crunching of the data is happening. It's providing answers back to them and being the facilitator and bringing the business domain knowledge, right? So this is the data scientist's work, and then we're here helping bring them success. So the BA knows the business environment, they understand the problem or opportunity the business is wanting to address, and they can help facilitate and communicate between the technical resources and the business, much like we do on our traditional projects, which is just a cool aha moment. It's not that different, right? So domain 4 is interpreting and reporting results. Now, important step here is that this is a really critical domain because this is where we're going to reap the value back from the analysis that's done. Here, the team steps back and they're going to see what was learned, and they're going to find ways that they take the technical results and package them that in a way to communicate back to the business for which they're doing this work, right? So let's look at what it involves. It involves activities to identify and analyze the stakeholders, those people who have an interest in the analytics research. It involves planning for stakeholder communication. It involves determining the communication needs of stakeholders that we'll be working with and interacting with. Interpreting the results is a big piece of this. So the results of data analysis, we need to glean insights from what the data is telling us. Because remember, we're going to have informed decision making. So what is the data? What are we learning? And then we have to find different ways to communicate the results to the business stakeholders or customers or whoever we're doing this work for. Now, I'm sure just from this list, we know that BAs excel at stakeholder identification, stakeholder analysis, communication, facilitation. So this is a powerhouse domain where BAs have a lot to offer the analytics team in this area. And I think this is also a good example area to point out, if you remember what I said, that these domains, the work is happening iteratively. So far I've taken you through a sequential process, and you might say, why would I not identify stakeholders until I get to this step? Wouldn't I need to know my stakeholders when I define the problem and I determine what our research question is? And the fact is, yeah, you're going to have identified stakeholders and analyzed them and facilitated discussions at that point. But remember, we shouldn't be doing these sequentially. So we could, in essence, say we did part of this and then we jumped in to facilitate discussions for domain one. And we can always come back to this, right? As more stakeholders are interested in the work that we're doing, or our stakeholders change, or once we start understanding what we learn from analytics, maybe our communication approach or plan needs to adjust. So I think this is a real good example to get yourself to not think in a sequential way and to kind of see that iterative nature and how the different domains are working, not just as domain 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, so lastly, we have domain 5, which involves using the results of the analytics efforts to influence business decision making. This is where, through the analytics, we're moving the business away from making those decisions based on guesses or hunches or gut feel or whatever they were doing before, and we're allowing them or enabling them to make business decisions based on data or evidence. And so the activities here are really gleaning the insights and using what is learned from our analysis to inform business decision making, plain and simple. So before, another piece of this though, like before we would jump in and put a recommendation out there back to the business, depending if it's a problem or opportunity they've asked for us to help them through, there's an evaluation step. And we do evaluation to determine how successful the analysis was. So did the outcome of the analysis work to answer the research question? Or how well did the analysis address the business need, right? And you can kind of, when we talk about validation, doesn't this feel a little bit like the validation we do with a solution, right? But in this case, we're using those same skills to figure out, did we address the question? Are we able to answer and address the business needs? So if the analysis was sufficient to provide valuable insights that we can use to drive decision making and organizational change, then this effort that's happening is going to switch. And we're going to be able to use the results to drive conversations about how organizational change should be made based on what we've learned, right? And so in this scenario, in this environment or context, whatever you want to call it, the possibilities here are no different than they are on an IT project. We're going to call them solution options, and we're going to propose some options of how we make that organizational change. And guess what? All the same skills, all the same business analysis facilitation, all of that comes into play. It's kind of where we all start on a traditional project. Now, when the outcome's not what we expect, or if the data doesn't deliver the kind of insights required, or if there's no feasible solution to address the business need, then the business data analytics cycle could repeat all over again. Okay? And that's no different than, have you ever done a business case where doing nothing is still an option, right? Maybe that's where we end up for now. Maybe we have to wait some time. Maybe the data didn't tell us that we needed to change, right? So changes resulting from business data analytics 2 are, in order to implement them, they work very similar to what we know today. We prioritize them. They have to be funded. They have to be initiated like all other organizational changes, right? So now we're feeling much like our traditional project space, right? And then analysts are going to play an important role in explaining those options and setting into motion all the activities and work that's needed to move an organization forward to manage or recommend organizational changes. So we've come full circle, right? So I hope this high level introduction to the domains and a deeper dive into the activities, I hope that has introduced you to some really exciting ideas that might be running through your mind now of, this isn't so boring. there is some differences, but there are some similarities, right? So it should, give yourself a big round of applause because you've just covered and learned about 5 business data analytics domains and the tasks that are associated, which, a half hour ago, if you're coming here just learning about it, you didn't know, right? So now let's switch gears and look at something that, to me, again, I think this is the climax. This is the real fun part. Now that we've established a really strong foundation for what business data analytics is, let's focus in on business analysis and the role of the business analyst and how important that's going to be to help these business data analytics teams be successful. All right. And I thought one of the best ways to do that was to look at some challenges that organizations who have invested in business data analytics, the challenges or roadblocks that they're seeing. So regardless of how much money organizations have been pouring into business data analytics, per some surveys that have been done, the feedback is that they feel, organizations, decision makers feel that the investments that they're making into business data analytics are not helping them reap all the benefits they expected to get. And this feeling was supported by a study that I looked at called the State of Data Science. It was produced by Kaggle in 2017. I think they do a couple of these, every year, every other year, but their survey in 2017 went out to 16,000 participants, and I think there was a little bit over 7,000 respondent rates, but that's still a lot of people, and they identified these top 4 barriers to problems on their analytics projects. So I thought it was a good starting point to have this conversation about the value of business analysis. So let's just quickly walk through these. Their number 1 was lack of management or financial support for business data analytics work that's been happening. Now, they didn't say this, but in my mind, I'm thinking, well, maybe they made the investment, didn't get the value, and now they're finding they're not getting the support, right? That could be. Failure to create a clear question to explore with analytics. All right, now that you see that, you know what we talked about earlier. You can start thinking as a BA what might be going wrong there, right? Problem number 3, the inability of the analytics team to explain and communicate the results of their research back to stakeholders. We talked about that. We'll come back to it. And failure of the decision makers to follow through and utilize the results of the analytics research. I don't know about you, but I read that. I started thinking about not having the right solutions proposed, not being able to articulate the value. I mean, all these things are coming through if I were to do a root cause, all right? So another finding, it didn't make the top 4, but organizations were also saying it has been difficult to hire resources who possess the breadth of the skills that are needed to perform on these teams, because as I explained, you need pretty extensive technical skills, the programming, math, data sciencey skills, right? But you also have to maintain sufficient business domain knowledge to understand the type of research question to explore. And so what's happening, because organizations are having a difficult time finding that person with all these skills, they're beginning to shift away from looking for an individual who has everything that they need, technical and business, and instead they're developing teams where they're looking at what are the skills I need to have across my team, and then they're assigning the work by comparing the skills that are needed or required to the talents and skills that they have, but across individuals, right? So to me, when I read that, that's very much the model that we follow on our agile teams, right? Where a collective team is taking responsibility for the output or the product, and the responsibilities are assigned across the team, based on skill set and bandwidth to perform the task. So I thought that was really interesting. So that tells me, okay, this one person that can do it all, that model's not working. And so now with some of this failure going on with things that business analysis can solve, it sounds like an opening for business analysts, right? So the interesting takeaway from the research that I got was that I felt many of the challenges that organizations are struggling with in analytics are definitely situations where if they just did effective business analysis, they could resolve and close the gap on these. So I wanted to highlight for you these two, because I don't have time to go through all, but let's just focus on inability to explain and communicate results and decision makers not using the results. And let's look at that from a business analysis perspective, all right? So ability to translate business problems into questions that analytics can answer. I mentioned it's a critical step for analytics initiatives because it sets the foundation for the entire research. So super important. We don't want to start off with the wrong foundation. We don't want to have the analytics team posing random questions for analytics research that no one cares about. And we need the questions really to be of significant importance to the business because we need to make sure that the research and the investment that's going into analytics is really providing something of value back to the business. And so it's not a matter of just, oh, this is interesting to know, let's go do some analytics. In fact, though, what we need is to make sure what's being investigated and researched in analytics is actually helping the organization move forward on their strategy, right? Very similar to what we do. So data scientists understand the technical aspects of their positions very well, is what we see from the research, but often they either don't have the time, or maybe they don't have the interest, or maybe they lack the experience to really understand the business domain. And so business analysts excel at this. And making that tie or connection between the business and the data and the research being conducted is an area where business analysts, they've been doing this for years, right? They can lend support to their analytics team. So building and demonstrating empathy for the customer. I feel like I don't even need to talk about this, but we will. Business analysts understand the importance of empathizing with the customer's experience. We know that as business analysts. We're probably one of the most important roles on any project that brings in this perspective from the customer's viewpoint. So in business data analytics, understanding the customer's pain points and their likes or their dislikes is really critical for the same reasons that we need to have this information for any type of project, right? For analytics, empathizing with the customer is going to help us ensure the highest value research is being pursued. And it's going to set the context to make sure the team is solving something of importance to the business. Data analytics needs to provide financial returns for the business, or it's not sustainable. So one of the best ways to ensure that this is happening within your organizations is to focus your team on finding solutions that customers care about. And that happens through empathizing with the customer. Okay, communicating technical results to non-technical stakeholders. I mean, let's face it, business analysts are natural at this. They have always held an important position. And we said for years, right, serving the bridge between business and IT. I mean, how many times have we said that? And it's no different with business data analytics, because it's very hard for the data scientists to move away from their technical language and to be able to speak to the layperson. And often the results from analytics are being communicated in technical terms. They're hard for the business to understand. The language is just techie. It's, you know, what we've done for years on our IT projects. It is unfamiliar to the business. It's too advanced or technical for the stakeholders to care, and the communication gap it just widens. So this isn't anything new. This has been the case for developers engaging with the business for decades. And again, it's not to slam development teams or data scientists or techie people. It's to say, you know, good communication can't happen. I mean, it can happen between developers, but it ends up being not something developers specialize in, right? But it is something a business analyst specializes in. So of course, why not go to the role that has that important skill that can bridge that gap? When we talk about proposing viable solutions, I kind of touched on that originally. That we need to make sure that the solutions are things that are viable, right? So it's not just any old solution, it's making sure one that aligns. You know what, I want to go back to the bullet ahead because now I thought of two things I wanted to say. I wanted to actually explain, going back to communication, I wanted to explain two techniques you can think about. And I should have been looking at my notes a little bit closer, but so we saw from the prior research that there was a failure point, that a lot of analytics teams are not having the ability to bring the message down to the level, right? So one of the techniques that business analysts can learn, and this is the note-taking part, right? To be able to bring the insights back to their team is the art of storytelling. So I don't know if you've trained on it or you've read about it, but this art of storytelling is really moving communication from a technical conversation into one that is going to bring it to a level of understanding that the business really understands, because we're using business terminology in a business context. And so business analysts can do this really well. And BAs that are working in analytics are going to be masters at it. Another way that you can add value to your teams to improve communications is this other technique called data visualization. And visualization is typically, again, not a strong suit for data scientists. They build the model, but then they don't know how to take it from the technical visualization down to a level. So again, I'm not saying it can't be done, but it's going to be an area where business analysts excel. And with data visualization, you can look towards your business analysts on your team to find different ways to visually communicate the outcomes of what we're learning from analytics. So it will then be clear through the storytelling and the visualization what it is that we're trying to decipher from the data, what we're trying to learn from the analysis work. So sorry I overlooked that, but I did want to dig down and I forgot that I did want to emphasize those two particular techniques. All right. So again, I won't go into viable options there because I did touch on it earlier. But the whole point is that these solutions need to be tied to the upfront work, right? Something of importance, something that is of value, something that maybe will allow us to innovate or create new services, help us retain customers, whatever it is, whatever those metrics are that the business is going after. The BA is right there to define, once we learn something from the data, what should we do next, right? And then, of course, the whole reason we are in this space, the whole reason analytics is so important is we want to help organizations make informed decisions. And so, that kind of concludes like what I wanted to show you about business data analytics and all the different areas where you can start adding value. So the last piece, and I want to leave enough time for questions, but I want to shift gears and now just share with you how IBA is supporting organizations and individuals with business data analytics. It's really, really exciting stuff. So coming real soon, IBA is offering for a free download the two introductions. You see them to the right, the introduction to business data analytics. Now there's two because the first one is going to cover in much more detail what I was able to walk you through today. Today we did a high level look at the 5 domains of business data analytics. The introduction to business data analytics for a practitioner or a practitioner view is going to take it to the next level. So it's going to cover how business analysis supports the work of business data analytics, but it's going to walk you through the domains at a deeper level, get into those skills and techniques that I couldn't really today. Now, something we didn't talk about today is what's going to be covered in the second introduction, and this is the introduction to business data analytics for organizations. Now, this introduction speaks to the absolute need to perform good BA work upfront to make sure that organizations are setting up analytics practices or the work that these enterprise rollouts of analytics are doing, but across the organization that we're actually using analytics to align to our strategy. So that is an introduction geared towards a more strategic level, okay? IABA is also going to be launching later this year a professional certification in business data analytics. And this is exciting because it's a credential for anybody that has business analysis experience. You have that foundational knowledge, but you also have somewhere around 2 to 3 years of applying that business analysis skill set on a business data analytics in that context or on those type of projects. So that'll be coming up later this year. You can also see that IBA's developed an explainer video that's coming out, a separate paper on business data analytics just to talk about the relationship of business analysis to analytics. And then, of course, we have this webinar and other ones that we'll do that we'll make available for you. There's an exciting, cute, really informative infographic that will be available for download. And I also am working with some volunteers to just kick off another project this year that's going to be focused on a practice guide in business data analytics. Now, the practice guide is going to be more hands-on. So if you're wanting to know the difference between what's coming out from an introduction perspective and the practice guide, I would say the introduction looks at what is business data analytics, and the practice guide is going to show you how to do the work. So we're going to show you techniques and how to use them and give you good examples and stuff like that. So a ton of cool stuff. There's a lot of momentum. All of this has been fueled by the community. IBA members, corporate members requesting IBA to help out in this space. So IABA has been working diligently to develop this stuff. This is a really cool week for us because the introductions are going to be coming out and available for access. So it's kind of a launch week in a way for us. And then the explainer video. And then later you'll get, a link to the webinar if you want to go back through and listen to that again. So that's it. Again, like the big piece now after all of this is getting out the door is that practice guide. So that's really where we're focusing the next level of effort. The rest of the stuff will be dripping out across the next couple of months. So there's my contact information as well as Jazz's. He heads up the product development team at IBA. So any questions you have about any of the products that are launching, feel free to email either one of us or both of us. And then there's my LinkedIn. I love to connect with BAs, so feel free to connect with me. And I will be quiet. I've left 12 minutes for questions, but I'll hand it back over to Terry Lynn. Let me know what you're seeing in the chat box.
And we have lots of questions, Laura. So thank you so much. So first question is, how would you suggest a BA transition into analytics?
Ooh, that's a great question, because what's exciting with all the changes that we're seeing is that it's a new career path, right? Or another avenue you can go. And so just like you would transition into business process, or if you worked on business process and want to get into IT, or you want to get from waterfall to agile, any of those, other career paths, analytics is going to be no different in that you're going to have a core set of skills. So learning how they can be applied, like what we did today, and adapted, how you would use the same skills, but adapt maybe the outputs that you produce. Knowing and learning that is really important. And then, of course, I went through 2 new techniques maybe for traditional BAs, but like the storytelling, and you're going to need to go learn those techniques, right? So you're going to have to find some training or some way to learn that. And then, of course, if you believe in certification, which to me, I religiously believe that's a great way to open a door to say, hey, I've done this extra professional development and I have this as well. So any of these things, it's just building your professional development toolbox up. And so it's that answer is going to be different depending who you are and what you bring to the table. But you know what you need to do and operate in the space. So you just have to figure out where the gaps are and then augment it with those tools.
Super.
What else you got?
Yeah, what are the top skills needed by a BA to transition?
Okay, well, let's not talk techniques, but let's just talk about skills. I use the word facilitate quite a bit, right? Collaborate, facilitate. I think those are top skills. I don't think it's going to harm you at all to understand the technology piece. We had that old argument with traditional projects, should a BA know technology? Well, I think you do. How do you propose solutions if you don't know what technology is capable of? It's the same thing here. You need to know, work with your data scientists, see what type of entry-level training you can do. Understand statistics and math. You may not be able to build those models, but you should be able to understand how statistics is applied to get the results that we do. And you should be able to understand it from a business perspective. So I think the math skills, to statistics, the visualization, the collaboration, facilitation, all of those are a great start.
And this sort of ties into the next question, and maybe you've possibly answered some of it, but was someone just wanted to know how advanced do you think an entry-level analyst's programming and slash database skills need to be successful?
I don't think they need to be okay. So, first of all, your organization is really going to define what they're going to expect from your role. So, every organization is going to use the position different, just as we see with BAs, right? But, if I were to take a guess, I would say being able to run a SQL query, understanding relational databases, understanding the differences between data sources, what's a data mart, a data lake, all big data, what does all that mean, right? You're not going to build, you shouldn't be asked to be building the mathematical models. I mean, that's a whole discipline of data science, right? So it's focusing on the business aspects of what we covered today. But so the technical skills, again, your organization is going to lead you to know where that line is for your company. But I think enough that you understand what's being talked about in the team meetings and that you can help out. When think about data, I mean, go back to some of your data modeling skills, understanding data flow diagrams and indeed relationship diagrams. If you can understand that aspect and understand the data from a business perspective, that's what you're bringing in. We don't need another person to be writing programming code because that's going to be the data science person. We need the business analyst representing the business aspect. What else, Terry?
Okay, and I'm going to have to jump around a little bit because the screen is teeny tiny and, and I was trying to group things together, but it doesn't always cooperate. So I'm just going to start at the top again. And this is a great question because I'm sure a lot of the people online are CBAP certified and some maybe aren't. So is there a prerequisite to earn the CBAP before the CBDA?
No, no. So for the new, we're talking about, so that question was geared towards the new business data analytics certification, right?
Correct.
It's a level 2 certification. So much like the IBA AAC, you're going to register to take it. And so IBA provides that guidance that you should have business analysis skills and then have 2 to 3 years working on a business data analytics team or in environment, understanding that context. But it's really up to you when you're ready to go. So you're not going to do the application, you're going to do the registration process similar to the IABA AAC, and it's on you. So it's a level 2. It's not at the level of a CBAP at all.
Gotcha. So available to more people then as well.
Yeah, yeah. And again, the thought process here is this. Analytics is huge. Organizations need help. There are so many people going into it because there's so many jobs out there and organizations are having a hard time filling those positions. And so, as I was saying, is they can't find the data scientist who has all of the skills. And to me, that's where we were decades ago when we couldn't find the software developer that could do all the business stuff, right? So it makes sense that we use the business analysis just like we have for decades in IT software development to augment the skills that are needed here in analytics. And so that's what this is about. And so this credential is mirroring the business aspects and enough about analytics where you can read visualizations and be able to walk through those domains we talked about and contribute and be able to know your modeling skills and the business aspects of it, and of course be able to interpret results of analytics visualizations.
Okay, we'll go to another question. And actually, there's been quite a few questions around when is it going to be available. I know we talked about the papers that are being introduced within this next week, but there are some individuals that are wondering when the introductions and certification will be available, and is there a cost?
Okay, so by the end of this week, we're going to have the introduction for business data analytics available to members. All right, for download, you'll get an email, you'll be able to download it. The free paper, let me just go back to that. All right, the paper is going to be available for everyone. All right, it's a nice paper. It's going to, tie in tying business analysis to data analytics. As a member, you get access to Introduction to Business Data Analytics Practitioner View. This is all this week, all right? So by the end of the week. Then as a corporate member, our corporate members are going to have access to the Introduction to Business Data Analytics for organizations. So that's a perk of being a corporate member. So there's something for everyone here, basically, right? The webinar will be up just like a traditional webinar that IBA does. They'll post it. You would know better, Terry Lynn, if it takes a week or whatever, but you guys will see that link and available from the IBA website. And of course, the explainer video will go up as well. The next big piece will be the launch in the next couple months of the credential. So just keep an eye out for that when you start seeing communication and marketing around that. And then the practice guide to, again, help you with some of that, how to do XYZ on a business data analytics initiative.
Excellent. Okay, there's some of these are sort of comments / questions, and this is from Ryan, and he says, I'm a BA in analytics and a master data management. Are there any resources or tips for writing quality analytics requirements or user stories?
Tips, I think that, well, that's a really good question. And so I'm making myself a note because you know what, that practice guide is what we're focusing on for people that are like you in that role that want that guidance of how to, right? So those are great techniques that, how I can use my traditional skills to understand how to write user stories on an IT project. But now I'm going to take that and does it change the user stories I developed for business data analytics? So how to, I would say start with the fundamentals of, how to do those techniques. And then I don't know that there's a lot of guidance out there completely focused on how to do that work in this space. That's what we're building. That's what we're trying to help you guys with. And so tell me again, Terry Lynn, it was user stories and what was the other technique?
Sorry, I've been scrolling. My bad.
That's okay. I'll get it out of the chat, not to worry. And so we, that's exactly what we'll focus on is giving you that guidance. So to get you started though, those techniques, the traditional fundamental skill set of doing the technique, you need to understand that and know. So whether you're working on an IT, applying Agile and doing user stories, a lot of what you're learning there is applicable. Now we just have to say, well, how would it change or what would those user stories look like for analytics? And get that out and provide you some examples. I'm not seeing much differences, but start there. That was a good question.
Well, that's great.
That's exactly what I'm talking about though here.
So, and the thing that's exciting is that if there's questions in the question box that we don't get to, we'll run a report and make sure that that we get the answers out to the individuals as well. So, because there's lots of interest around the practice guide, and we even have someone who wants to volunteer to work with us on the practice guide.
Well, there's my contact. So please, yes, we'd love to have you because, the more people, the more hands on deck, the quicker we can get this done. And
that's wonderful.
We had, and you know what? I want to take a step back, and we had a delightful team of volunteers that helped with these introductions, and you'll see them recognized at the back of the introduction. So I do want to do a shout out to all of them for their dedication, their volunteer hours. It's not possible without volunteers. So, kudos to them to help us get us this far.
That's wonderful. And we have come to the end of our time. I think we could go on for another half hour at least with the questions and the conversations that are going on. But unfortunately, we're going to have to wrap things up. And I just want to take this opportunity to thank everyone for attending the webinar today. And a very special thank you to Laura. I hope everyone has a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are. And keep an eye out on our website for upcoming webinars. There's more exciting content on the way.
Yes, and the introductions later this week. So thank you for having me, Terry Lynn. Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Have a great day, all.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye.